Here I am, climbing up, feeling great, getting love. Here I go, risk it all, be worth it now, and that's for sure. Watch me as I Rocketeer.
Episode 38 of Fight Talk Down Under is brought to you by CMBT Nutrition. Go to cmbt.com.au for all your protein powder, protein bars, pre-workout, all that good stuff. Of course, CMBT are huge supporters of Aussie MMA, so make sure you give them some love. Use the promo code Justin for 10% off at the checkout. Now, guys, they say that maintaining downstairs, it gives you an extra inch, let's say. Now, we could all use an extra inch, couldn't we? Right? So, but shaving it really is a pain in the ass, right? I don't know if you guys sort of practice that, but it's it's a pretty tough process. But guys, there is a solution. Bare Nuts hair removal cream is much easier and safer than shaving, and far less painful and time-consuming than waxing. So go to nutcare.com.au. Use the promo code FightNews for 10% off at the checkout. That's nutcare.com.au. Promo code FightNews. Right, welcome everyone. Of course, I'm Dan from Fight News Australia and One Championship. We have my co-host here, of course, Eternal featherweight champion, Lockjaw Justin Van Heerden. How are you, mate?
Good, thank you. Fucking another episode. We rocked up. We're on time. We're ready to go. This isn't like us lately, but we're here.
Truth be told, we were actually an hour early this morning. We did forget that Tanera's based in Queensland and they don't have daylight savings up there, so we were good to go at an hour early. So that's got to be a record as well in itself.
I think so. We're doing well. We're on point this week. We're ready to go. It's going to be a sick episode.
Absolutely, and of course, without any further ado, of course, we've got a special guest on this week. The voice of Eternal MMA, Mr. Tanera Nathan. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Dan. Pleasure to be with you, lads. Justin, good to see you again. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Absolutely, anytime. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Now, I've got I guess I've got a fair few questions for you. It's an interesting sort of line of work you're in. So, what aside from the commentary gig, sort of like what do you do for a living? What does a day look like for you?
Well, if you go to my Instagram, A Day in the Life is a segment that I do on my channel. But other than commentary, I work at the casino. I do a bit of MC work for the WPT, which is the World Poker Tour. We have events at the casino once every, say, 3 months, and I'm on the mic there. Other than that, I actually work as a croupier, so I deal on the tables. I'm only there 3 or 4 times a week, just a bit of pocket money, but for the most part, trying to build my profile on the mic and in the booth. But like Justin, and I don't know if you've got kids yourself, Dan, but when you've got mouths to feed, you'll do anything to chase the dollar. So I've been working at the casino for the past 6 years now, just dealing on the tables. And if I do find myself in debt or need a bit of extra pocket money, I do a bit of security work as well. So very interesting life I've led over the past 10 years of my employment.
Yeah, there you go, man of many talents. So I guess how did you I guess come across combat sports? I assume you're a combat sports aficionado, given the the sort of line of work that you're in on the side there with the commentary. So what's your earliest memory of martial arts?
Aficionado, very loose term. I would say very amateur when it comes to combat sports. I had a few fights probably about 8 years ago now. 2 corporate boxing fights and 3 amateur boxing matches as well. That was just after I'd almost wrapped up playing rugby back in 2014. And then I think it was around end of 2014, 2015, I knew immediately I didn't want to be a fighter. I thought I'd leave that to Justin and the guys that are built for that, but wanted to be involved in sports as much as I can. So what happened was I spoke to my coach. At the time, I was training at Gold Coast PCYC. And I just went and said to him, I said, look, listen, if you've got any amateur tournaments or amateur fight nights coming up, I'd love to get on the mic and just to see if I can, just see if I can do it and be the MC. And so he said yes, and I think in July of 2016, got on the mic and we had, I think it was 92 fights, 92 amateur boxing matches for our club's in-house tournament. I started at 10 a.m. that day, didn't finish till 1 o'clock in the morning the next day. Did the whole show for free. But the feedback I got from that was quite positive. I did another amateur show, and then it wasn't until, I think, March of 2018, my first commentary gig as a colour commentator for a show called Boxing Mania at the Tweed Seagull Sports Club. Was on Fox Sports. So that was it happened pretty quickly. And I knew after I did the 2 amateur shows and then the show for Fox Sports, again, the feedback was positive. I knew, okay, well, this is something that I can actually do because I love boxing, always loved from boxing. I came from boxing, but I wanted to be involved in combat sports. When I made the transition to MMA, Justin, you probably remember this, I commentated a show with Daryl Martin. Nitro MMA, they were big probably about, say, 10, 12 years ago in the early 2010s. I did one show for them in 2018. From that show, I got in contact with Cam and commentated Eternal 32, I think it was. Brenton Mumford versus Kieran Joblin was the main event for that one. And since then, I've just been with Eternal. So that's just a quick breakdown of the last 5 years. I've been commentating from literally just thinking that I could get on the mic and have some fun to now it has become a passion of mine.
Right, was it something that you always thought that you wanted to do, sort of the emceeing and commentary and that sort of thing?
Definitely not. I mean, I say this all the time. You're probably going to go deaf if you listen to me too much. Just ask the fans that tune into Eternal every month.
I won't share how I became privy to this information, but you will like this because you are an ex-rugby player as well. But
yes,
there's people definitely listening that are fans of your passion and enthusiasm and your voice on the mic. One of them being the current captain of the Springboks, Sia Kolisi. Likes what he hears on the Eternal mics when the shows are on, when he's getting in there to watch old Lockjaw fight.
And you can't share how you got this information. How?
Yeah, I was going to say, you got to let the cat out of the bag here.
Look, through a family friend, we have held a discussion of sorts over FaceTime, and he's a fan of obviously Eternal. He's a fan of watching MMA. He's a fan of what some fighters are obviously doing. Guys like
Down Under, obviously as well.
Big fan of Lockjaw, Fight Talk Down Under. Everything that's happening. So that's something. That's something that gets put out there. So it's pretty cool. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, well, if you see the captain, please let him know. Thank you very much. I mean, we're actually the same age, but he's actually someone that I look up to, and he is inspirational. So that's, well, I guess I can retire now. I think that's, it doesn't get any better than that. That's it. I guess I'm done. But, when you see Sia next door, if you talk to him, tell him thank you very much. That means the world.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge. There you go. Is rugby something that you'd sort of want to get into at some point, commentating rugby or some sort of involvement there?
That's a great question, Dan. See, with rugby, how do I describe this? Rugby was and will always be my first love. Unfortunately, I didn't go as far as I'd wanted to in rugby. My goal was always to play professional football and one day play for the Australian Wallabies. I did quite well at high school. Played first 15 for 3 years and played at probably the state level for Queensland schoolboys and even after school Queensland under 19s as well. But never really got to the point where I wanted to. And for a long time, had a bit of inner bitterness towards rugby, not towards anyone in particular, but just it was coming from myself. I was like, man, I was just bitter I didn't make it. I just wanted to get away from the sport. And that's where I obviously started boxing, found MMA, started doing a bit of wrestling. So when you ask about going back to commentate rugby, there still is a little bit of an emotional attachment to commentating rugby. I've done, I think, a couple of rugby league matches just for local club, and I think one of the first 15 matches for my old school. And I could almost feel myself saying, you know what, you still got it, mate. You can come back. You can still be a Wallaby, when the reality is that window has probably has closed. And it is something that I would like to do down the track, but I think that my focus is probably on MMA/boxing at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you still need a bit of time to sort of heal those old wounds, I guess.
Definitely. The dagger's still there. I pulled it halfway out, but not ready to let it go just yet. I have been asked. I think there was a deal with Stan Sport, who covers all the. Is it the? I think it's the Queensland Hospital Cup rugby here in Queensland. And I had a season with Bond University, I think, a couple of years ago as well. So I did a bit of networking there. Hopefully, we'll see. We'll see how we go. I'm not ready to go back to rugby yet, but it is an option.
Yeah, right. Without sort of delving, I guess, too deep into it, like it is quite a common story. Like, like I've sort of spoken to people who have sort of tried to make it in the AFL and things like that, and haven't made it. And there's it's kind of a common thread is like a little bit of resentment, I think, towards the sport when it's kind of shunned them in a way. So like, where do you think that comes from?
Well, for a time there, resentment is probably the best word to describe how I was feeling for such a long time. In 2009, it was my last year of high school, and actually I was meant to finish in 2008. And I'd played 2 years of first 15 prior to that, and it was actually the director of sport came to me and said, "Hey, look, listen, we're trying to put a good team together for 2009. Our first 15, we think we're a good shot at winning the premiership here in Queensland. Would you like to come back and have another year?" I was like, "Man, fuck yeah, absolutely." So I came back with the intention of playing for Australia, and I guess when I went back, that was all I thought about. Little did I realize, and it took me 10 years to kind of realize this, the whole point of bringing me back in 2009 was to play for the school. It was the school that was paying my fees. It was the school that was that had asked me to come back and contribute to the team. But I'd lost sight of all of that. My goal was to go, I'm going back for myself. So I went back with a selfish mindset. So when it didn't happen to me, or when it didn't happen for me, and I saw all of my mates go on and play for Australia and get Super Rugby contracts, I thought that should have been me. And it wasn't resentment towards them because, I was happy. I was happy for everyone that made it. It's just that it was almost like, from a selfish perspective, why couldn't that be me? And that's where the resentment came from was, well, you know what, if it's not going to be, well, then fuck everyone else, I'm out of here. And that was the wrong attitude to have at the time. So when you talk about resentment, that's where it came from. It took a long time to, I guess, heal from that. And what I've realized over the years is I wasn't the only one going through it. And I think that, in 2023, we're quite open when it comes to talking about men's mental health and expressing your feelings. I'm still not there to let it all out just yet. But being self-aware of where it comes from and not to go there again, I think that's been the biggest life lesson that has helped me find other opportunities, such as commentary. So what was the worst failure of my life turned into one of the best things that could have happened. So no, thank you for asking that. I've never really been able to share that.
Yeah, there you go. No, I appreciate you sharing. Did you think commentary might be a pathway for you to sort of fall back in love with the sport, or is it just kind of is it just time that'll heal that wound?
I think so. I think it's like breaking up with an ex. I don't necessarily want to go back just yet, but I think you never say never, right? I think I will eventually make my way back to rugby, but I think where I'm at now, and when you look at the popularity of mixed martial arts in this country, it's growing like rapid fire. I wouldn't want to get off this moving bus. 5 years ago, if you asked me, "Oh, where do you see yourself?" I would have said, "Yeah, I will try commentate rugby. I will try." I was doing everything. I was doing boxing, rugby, as well as commentating for Eternal. But I think now, and after having signed exclusive with Cam and Ben, after all they've given me, I wouldn't want to get off this like I said, this rocket ship, because I'm sure we'll get into this later on in the episode, but Eternal as a brand is growing like I've never seen any other MMA promotion in Australia grow. So I'd be an idiot to kind of say, well, I've got another deal here for, even if it might be better money, I'd be an idiot to kind of get off this moving ship and, probably end up in the same situation I was in 2019, you and Justin and everyone else going to the moon, and here I am, on some other deal. But I'm absolutely loving being cage side for Eternal at this stage, and maybe one day I'll go back to footy, but not just yet.
Yeah, it's interesting that you kind of mentioned, I guess, the trajectory of the sport, right? There's a lot of people, a lot of journalists, fighters, commentators, pretty much everyone who's in the sport, particularly at the local level, is kind of just, there's not enough money in it to pay people's bills, right? To feed families, I have kids as well, that sort of thing. So we're all kind of just like riding this, like you sort of said, that rocket ship to sort of to see where it goes, and it's on that sort of trajectory. So yeah, where do you think it's going? Like, where do you think the I guess Eternal in particular could get to?
Well, look, I've been with the company for 5 years now, and 5 years ago, if you said that we were going to be where we are today, as far as from a production standpoint, as far as the matchups that have been made when it comes to the title fights and fighters themselves becoming their own brand, becoming their own stars. Excuse me, the deals that they've had with ESPN, Eternal Playback was a big one for me personally. The deal with UFC Fight Pass. If you said that to me that in 5 years' time we're going to have all of this, I'd probably look at you sideways. But Cam and Ben had this vision right from day one to say that, no, we're going to be the leading promotion in Australia and we're going to push all the chips in the middle and we're going to get there. Now that we're here, everyone's starting to jump on the ship. So as far as if I'm going to fast forward another 5 years, it is hard to say because I don't necessarily have the vision that they have. But I would definitely say, number one, where we are at the moment, Australia's leading promotion or premier promotion, which I always say when I'm opening a show, that's already solidified. I would definitely say that we could probably rival promotions like One Championship. There is a vision that we could rival promotions such as maybe even a Bellator or a Risen or a Glory. I definitely think that Australia and New Zealand isn't the limit for Eternal. I don't necessarily know what Cam and Ben's plans are, but I know they've got connections in the UK. I know there's a market in Asia. I don't necessarily know what they are, but I wouldn't limit it to just being your local domestic promotion, which is what it was probably 5 to 6 years ago. This thing is bigger than I ever would have thought it would have been, and it's not just due to the production or the fighters. It is due to their vision and expanding this brand and saying, you know what, we're not just going to set a limit for ourselves where we just have the local talent. I definitely see it expanding outside of Australia. Where to? I've got no idea. I'll leave that to Cam and Ben. But again, coming from where we've come from 5 years ago to today, there's no ceiling to how big Eternal could get on a global scale.
That's really interesting. Like we're kind of in swing an event down here in Melbourne just at the moment. So what do you reckon the timeline would be for like an overseas expansion?
I mean, we've been to New Zealand before. I think the last time we were in Auckland was at Eternal 50, which was in February 2020, just before the COVID lockdown happened. I definitely think that New Zealand would be the next pit stop. If you think about, the gyms in New Zealand, not just City Kickboxing, but Oliver MMA and other and the other talent that they've got in New Zealand. I mean, you could take fighters over from here, but you could build a show just with New Zealand talent. And with Eternal being a recognised MMA brand, not just in Australia but in New Zealand and even around the world, it wouldn't just be gyms and fighters and friends supporting their teammates, but people would actually come to watch the spectacle. The same thing that when the UFC comes to town, when it comes to Perth, when it comes to Melbourne, we all go there as fans of the UFC. I can certainly see Eternal becoming that having that same profile when it goes to places like New Zealand, or even if they took a show back to England. I don't know how they would compete with Cage Warriors, but I definitely say they'd be on par as far as scouting the local talent in England and getting people to the show. Because as we know here, it is the fans that make this sport. Like you said, there's we all want a bit of this, but where it is at the moment, the money is coming and it will come. But what we need to do is continue to build the profile and get people involved, because it is the fans that, they essentially make the sport, but at the end of the day, they pay the money. So the more seats we get in the stadiums, whether it's here or England or New Zealand, the better off it's going to be for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And what's the secret with Eternal, do you think? Like, it's been quite a fast rise. Like, I think Eternal's been around about 10 years now. We see promotions sort of pop up quite regularly and sometimes they even come and go, So what's been the secret with Eternal? Why is Eternal why is Eternal sort of advanced to the top of the tree within 10 years?
It's the commentary, Dan. I mean, I'm surprised you're asking this question. I mean, it's got to be the commentary.
It's true. Yeah, this is a dumb question. We'll move on.
In all seriousness, I think that look, the production is fantastic. I think if you look at if you've ever watched, I'm sure you have. If you've ever watched a show start to finish, one thing that I pride myself on is making sure that everything moves as seamlessly as possible. But it's not just the production. I think, for me personally, and this is just my opinion, it's the fighters, and it will always be the fighters, because you're not there to listen to me. You're not there. I mean, I'm there to listen to Blake Richardson yell on the mic and do the introductions, but let's be honest, we are there to see the fighters. And the ability that Cam and Ben have to make the biggest matchups with guys that are either in their prime or coming up to their prime, their ability to make, high stakes, star power fueled fights is incredible. And I think that's what makes Eternal different to the rest of the competition, is that, and Justin, you can probably attest to this, from a fighter's standpoint, you're always looking at what's best for me. If I'm fighting on Hex, or if I'm fighting on XFC, or if I'm fighting on Eternal, what's going to be best for me? I think the one thing that fighters have realized is what's best for them is fighting on Eternal. 1, because you're going to have the most eyes on you. 2, because you're going to fight the best competition. And 3, I'll always give you a bit of rub in the commentary booth. So I definitely think that when it comes to Eternal, they have a habit of making the best fights, the biggest fights at the right time. And what you'll do is you not only will you attract more eyes to the sport, but the fighters themselves will be, no, that's where I need to be. You know, I can fight on XFC, I can fight on Hex, and I'm not saying anything about these promotions. As well, and even have guys that I'm managing fight there as well. But I want to get them to Eternal, because if they want to get to the UFC, you need to fight an Eternal. And, 5 years ago, I would have said, yep, you can get there without necessarily fighting an Eternal. Today, you can as well. But you don't want to get to a Dana White Contender Series or a UFC fight not having proven yourself on the best and biggest stage. And where are you going to get the best fights? On Eternal.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. You sort of mentioned there you were managing some fighters as well. Is that another string to your bow?
Yep. Amateur hour as a manager again. But I've been training partners with, you may have heard of him, Sam Dobb. 3-1 as a pro. He is currently the XFC middleweight champion. I've just been taking care of his affairs when it comes to matchmaking with XFC or Cam. He's the only one that I'm kind of managing full time. There were a couple of guys that I wouldn't say managing, but helping to get fights on XFC and Eternal. I think Alessandro Inacio and Gordon Real. I don't really manage too many people. Sam's the only one I'm focused on, and I think that when you look at Sam as a guy who has the potential to go all the way to the UFC, I've got no problem investing time and energy for a guy that I personally think can go all the way. So, yeah, manager's another title I probably put in the fine print of my business card, not directly out my name.
Is that something you're going to be looking to sort of expand, or is that just sort of a little kind of love job on the side for Sam and the team you've got there?
Probably just for Sam at this stage. I mean, I think that I have a lot more learning to do when it comes to, contract obligations and the legal side of being a manager. At this stage, managing one guy, it's pretty simple. The promoters contact me directly. They say, we've got this opponent, that opponent, what do you want? And then because Sam's in a position of power today where he's got the belt and he can pick and choose who he wants to fight, it makes my job easier when I say, yep, we want this guy, we want this amount of money. What do you think? Yes or no? Whereas if I was to go down that path, I think that, I'd have to talk to like a Daniel Maudsley or someone who's been doing it for a few years. I certainly think I've got the skills to do it as far as communication, networking, and building those relationships, understanding people and their tendencies. As I'm sure, as you guys know, we meet a lot of interesting personalities in this industry, and you do sometimes have to choose your words carefully depending on who you talk to. I think I'm quite good at that. I think that's something that I would go down in the future, but at this stage, I'll just focus on Sam.
Right, and on the commentary as well, actually, you kind of touched on before keeping the show sort of seamless as well.
Yes.
That was sort of one thing I wanted to sort of ask you about, actually, is like, how do you sort of maintain that synergy in the commentary booth without sort of talking over the top of each other? I guess like it always seems so seamless how you kind of jump into your bit and then Kyle or whoever's sort of alongside you then sort of takes over and sort of analyzes as the fight goes on. Is there like a run sheet or like sort of how does it run on the day?
Yeah, they look after us on the night. We do have a run sheet. We've got a run sheet for the undercard, and we've got a run sheet for Fight Pass. And it pretty much tells us everything that's happening. It doesn't say what I'm meant to say or what Kyle's meant to say, but it's just a structure of how the show is going to be run, from introductions to walkouts to sponsors to the readouts that I'm meant to have. Again, got to give credit to Cam and Ben for being organised in this fashion, because when I commentated for Fox Sports, 5 years ago, I had absolutely nothing, and I was just going off the cuff. And my experience as an MC for 2 amateur tournaments was literally nothing. Whereas fast forward 5 years later, I've done over 50 shows. I probably don't need the production sheet, but I definitely still use it. So that's one thing that helps it run seamlessly. The second thing that I would say is it all depends on who's sitting next to me, because I'll be honest with you, I've had 13 different color commentators / fight analysts since I started working with Eternal. 13 different. And I can tell you right now, I love all of them, but Kyle's number one. Because the understanding that me and Kyle have, and this comes again through experience, is that you never want to be talking over each other. And if it's one thing that I always say this to myself, people came to listen to Kyle because he knows more than you. So if he's got something to say, I need to shut up. And that's one thing that I've always stood by, is that, you know, I'll give a nice opener or an introduction, or I'll bring Kyle in and then I'll listen, because it's learning for me. So I think when it comes to making sure that the show runs seamlessly, it's having an understanding with, your verbal sparring partner, to know when to come in, when to be quiet, and when I need to bring the energy and when I need to just tone it down a little. And the producers always let me know, but when the producer tells me I need to tone it down, I just do this. So that's an easy way to fix the guys in the rear, so you can just be yourself. But no, that's just a couple of things that I use, the production sheet as well as working in synergy with Kyle. It's actually quite amazing when I go back and watch the shows and I realize, oh man, I might have had a bad night, but then I go back and watch and I go, oh, it's okay, I can live with that.
Follow-up question: how much harder is it to keep that synergy and flow when you're busy commentating a show and old Lockjaw's texting you while he's watching it at home, just with the banter and just telling you stuff while you're trying to do a serious job?
It actually, you'd be surprised, it actually helps. And that's the funny thing, is that, in between the breaks or when there's introductions and things like that, you're usually one of the guys I'll message, because one, you're either messaging me, or two, I know you're watching. It certainly helps. It's certainly not a deterrence or a distraction from what I'm doing. And if you notice, I've given you a few shout outs at key moments. It might be after a Proper 12 sponsor shout out or a Ned's read. I'll come in with the old Lockjaw and via UFC Fight Pass here tonight. Shout out to the champ. Looking forward to seeing him next.
There's been a few times where I'm like midway messaging this bloke and he's busy commentating, and I'm like, fuck man, should I just leave him alone?
No, I'll be watching my phone while I'm watching Caleb and Joey fight during the main event. So I'll be waiting for you.
What an absolute menace. Absolute menace. Yeah, it's interesting. Like the whole commentary thing, it's an interesting skill, right? Because obviously, like, you know, I've done my interviews and you know, do podcasts and things like that, and people always sort of put that to me, like just like mates and stuff like that. Just like, oh, you know, you're gonna be the next Joe Rogan, you can do some commentary and that sort of stuff. And people think that it's just a natural progression for just some mug who sits in his spare room, you know, doing podcasts and stuff like that. But I can barely put a sentence together on a podcast in the comfort of my own home, let alone in a commentary booth. You know what I mean? So there's obviously a lot of skill that goes into it. And I always wondered about the sort of, I guess, the placement of the sponsors and the intros and that sort of thing. How much of that is off the cuff, and how much of that you sort of have to follow a schedule. So yeah, it's interesting that you sort of break all that down.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think that in the beginning, they kind of gave me a bit more room to move in essence, where I could kind of choose, you know, when I wanted to plug a sponsor. During the fight's the easiest. I mean, because I've done both. I've done color commentary, fight analysis, and what I do now is play-by-play. And to be honest, I enjoy play-by-play, one, because I think that there's other people that have the credentials, far more so than myself, to do color commentary. Guys like Kyle, I think Benny Alloway, Callum Potter, guys that I've commentated with in the past, that can add more weight to what's happening technically during a fight. Whereas one thing that I enjoy is the excitement, the climax, the finish, coming in with the big, you know, Mike Goldberg, it is all over, so on and so forth. But I do enjoy doing both. I think that's why I'm enjoying grappling. I'm enjoying, I want to compete again this year, probably box again this year, just to add a bit more weight if I do step back into that color commentary seat. But I had a lot more freedom back in the day, whereas today it's all laid out. I mean, they really do make it easy for us. And I don't know if you've seen, but they have what's called like the little bugs that come up on on the screen at time, it'll either be a Proper 12 or a Neds, and that's my trigger to say this matchup brought to you by Neds or Proper 12 or AHP or whoever. So again, experience over the past 5 years has helped, but being organised on the night, it makes it a lot easier for me and the rest of the team as well.
Absolutely. How much how do you prepare for an event? Like, how much research do you have to do to sort of get the fighters' stories down beforehand?
Now it's a lot easier because, like Justin, I've been cage side for a lot of these guys, again for a meaningful period of time. The hardest fights to prepare for are guys on their debut because you really don't know too much about them. And I'm going to point out the champ on this one. Fighters, they get given what's called a fighter profile sheet, and they're meant to fill it out. Justin's a culprit for this one. There's nothing on it, right? So if a guy's on debut, and you don't necessarily know, and there's nothing on that fighter sheet, well, guess what I'm going to do? I'll just make it up. All right, you don't have a nickname, I'll give you a nickname. So you better hope you put something on that fighter profile sheet, unless you want a nickname that you don't want to stick. But usually what I'll do is I'll go into the change rooms because I usually get there around 2:00. The show doesn't start till 5. I'll always go to the fighter meeting because I want to listen to if it's Pete Hickmont or John Sharp or whoever, Matt Wynn, whoever the referee is in charge. I want to listen to the rules. I want to see who's there, and then I'll just go and have a chat to the coaches if I don't know anyone. And then I'll make notes on my phone, and then as they're walking out or during the fight, there may be points of information that can help the viewer while they're listening. But otherwise, other than that, guys like, this week, Caleb and Joey, don't know too much about Joey, but there's enough footage that I can go back and listen to. Smiling Dave and Blake Donnelly, know plenty about those guys. Taser Malone, Tommy Nolan, Aiden Aguilera, plenty of content, plenty of footage that I can review leading up to the fight. And if there's any, gems or, you've had guys on your podcast before. I think the Eternal Insiders podcast is a great source of information. With Luke, I'll probably have a listen to a couple of those episodes as well, and maybe bring out a few points during the walkout, during the fight, just to give another educated perspective to those watching. Because I might know everything about these guys, but people watching around the world, they won't. And I think that if they can appreciate certain information that they're not necessarily privy to that I can reveal on the night, it certainly helps for a better experience during the show.
Yeah,
and I think that translates too, because sorry to cut you off, Dan.
No, you go.
I think that translates, and you can pick that out and actually see that that's being done. Because, I use an example of when I fought Alavi. I remember when I watched it back, you did sort of say, like during the fight, when I started piecing him up on the feet, and then you kind of mentioned to the fact that, I was pretty caught off guard by the fact that when Diego and that did the breakdown for it, they labeled it as being like a striker versus a grappler matchup. So, that's something that, obviously you went in, you're saying that you saw, you researched, was in your back pocket. It's, that's something that you can put in there to sort of add to what's happening and kind of, it made that extra sort of layer, I guess, for the people watching and for the fight. Because I know when I watched it back, I sort of, took note of that, and I was like, oh, see, okay, so people understood that I was annoyed by that, and it shouldn't be a surprise that I'm out here punching this bloke's face off.
You have never forgiven Diego for doing that breakdown for that fight, have you?
Nah.
I'll tell you this. There, I spoke when you probably saw the episode. When I spoke before we had the episode on the show with Justin, he was so furious about Diego breaking his fight down, and he made it a point to go out there and say, "No, I'm going to punish this bloke. I'm going to punish this bloke," and you did, But no, I appreciate you bringing it up, because when guys like yourself and other fighters have brought it up as well, I'm in the booth for you guys. Yes, I'm there for the viewers. Yes, I'm there to add a bit of entertainment. But who goes back and watches the fights? It's the fighters. Right? You go back and watch your own fights. Where can you improve? And for you to say that, I really appreciate it, because it tells me that I'm doing the right thing. Because as we all know, there's plenty of critics out there, and I've got my fair share, and I love it because I learn from the criticism. But to have you say that means a lot, because in all honesty, that was my view going into the fight. But little did I know, being down at Freestyle, training with the guys you were training, in my, I guess, uneducated opinion, you are a striker now. You're not just a striker, you're not just a grappler, but you are all around. There's not many holes in your game. So I thought when you started to piece him up on the feet, and I think it was just after you dropped him, I did mention that, and I was like, you need to get your credit. And even vice versa, if he'd taken you down and held you down and attempted submissions, I would have given him his credit as
100%.
well. But it goes both ways. But I think that for me personally, and going back to your question, Dan, about how do I prepare, feedback like this certainly helps me prepare even better, because now I know what I'm saying is the right thing. Not always, but sometimes.
I mean,
It's a
I've
real
got
sore
to give
point.
you like a good positive feedback, but I've also got to give you like, some critical feedback. You got to stop winking at me when I'm cage side, in the cage, near your panel, in front of you in the booth. You stop winking at me. I can't tell you how many fights I've had. I've got someone taken down in front of this bloke, and he's here winking at me while he's trying to commentate. It's, yeah.
We have fun on the
out.
night. We have fun on
We
the
do.
night. And I'll be cage side for your next fight too. So, look out for these ones. Looks like I'm having Tourette's or something.
How much feedback do you get? Like, do people sort of slide into your DMs and say, "Hey, you fucked up this intro," or "You said this about me," or that sort of thing? Like, does that happen?
Absolutely. And the thing is that I know I am the biggest troll out there. I mean, if you've seen the things that I post, I talk enough shit on the internet to last a lifetime. So when it comes back at me, I always welcome it with open arms and take it on board. But it just depends on who's saying it. If it's some random in India that's having a go at me for trying to impersonate Joe Rogan or be a John Anik, Mike Goldberg wannabe and say I'm never going to make it, thank you, mate, have a nice day. On the other hand, if Cam pulls me aside and says, "Hey, mate, look, I listened to the show, great show, but I think you need to improve these points," they're the ones that I'll take seriously.
Yeah.
I'll share this. I won't mention any names, but during the Trevor Sinclair Josh Kuhn fight at Eternal, I think it was Eternal 58. You probably remember this, but there was an accidental nut shot that Josh landed while
Fake
he was
news.
pinned up. It's fake news. It's a hoax. There was an accidental nut shot that Josh landed up against the cage, and I am constantly reminded of that, even to this day. There'll be guys, it's all banter at the end of the day, but I'll have my mates message me and say, "Hey, mate, good luck in the weekend. Good luck in the booth this weekend. Just make sure don't fuck up and miss any nut shots." Because during that fight, Josh Kuhn kneed Trevor Sinclair in the nuts, and the ref missed it. And my phrasing was, "There's been an accidental nut shot from Kamikaze. Phil Cassidy's missed it, and this is where I went wrong." I said, "If it even happened at all." So I didn't choose a position. And the team from Integrated just lit me up. And there was one of their, I think it was one of their guys, one of the flyweights. He slid into my DMs, posted a public story, and I loved it. I reposted it, tagged him and everything. But then I got a message from one of the other guys saying, "Hey, mate, don't read into too much of the bullshit. We think you're doing a good job. But yeah, you missed the nut shot." So I do. And even to this day, there's not too much negativity, but it's part and parcel of the job. I mean, Justin, you can attest. I mean, I always describe it as, I don't think toxic industry is the right word to use, but it's very critical. I mean, I played rugby, you played rugby. I mean, you're familiar with your AFL background, Dan, and I don't think I've ever seen a sport where the athletes are so scrutinized, even when they're doing the right thing. I've never seen it.
Yeah.
What makes it exciting? That's why I love it. That's why we love it. But at the end of the day, it's part and parcel. And if you're going to sit in a position that I am and have an opinion and give your opinion to thousands of people, you cannot expect it all to be positive. There is always going to be some negative. So I embrace it.
Bro, I get the weirdest fucking DMs, man. I get the weirdest ones.
Oh, what was the one you got the other day? Someone was saying they were going to bash you or something?
Yeah, he's like, "Look, man, I could easily bash you, so use that to motivate you to go and win your next fight." So I was like, "Fuck, all right." Well, this dude said it, so I gotta. So yeah,
it's amazing.
No, you're right. It's incredible. It's one of my favorite things about the sport.
It is.
Like,
it is. It's one of
any other sport, right? Like if someone's like, you shouldn't. I mean, it's pretty wild when anyone criticizes any professional athletes doing any sport. Like you see it all the time. Go on LeBron James's page and someone's there in his comments being like, "You could have done this better. You could have done that better." What are you talking about? He's one of the best basketball players in the world. Like, and also you're not in a position to say that to him. But when people are doing it to fighters, like, and I see it all the time. Like, I'll look at some of the comments on people put on some of these fighters' pages, and I'm like, you have no idea. Like, you would never say that to that person. Like, if they were standing in front of you, you'd probably high five them, ask them for a photo. Like, it's crazy.
Exactly, and what's always boggled my mind is I understand the entertainment value of it. I mean, when you're walking out to the cage, you're not just hearing cheers, all right? You're also hearing boos, okay? But at the end of the day, there is an entertainment value to people talking shit online. But it goes back to your point of what you said. It's who is it, all right? If it's you and Jack going back and forth, well, you know you're going to settle it one day. But these guys online, they're never going to be in front of you, so they can say whatever they want because they know that. And
exactly,
and to say that it doesn't hit here sometimes is a lie, because it does. I mean, I've had guys. I've been in many internet wars behind my phone in the comment section, because it has hit me here. You know, they've said something like your hair's shit or your beard's faded. Like, that hits me here, right? It's like, those are fighting words. You know what I mean? But again, it all goes back to, you know, who says it. Like, if it's you and Jack or you and Diego, well, that's fine, because you guys are going to sort it out. But man, these guys, they're just they're so comfortable sitting behind a mic, headphones, and a computer screen, like me. Yet at the end of the day, they know they'll never settle it. But no, I like what you said. We do love it. We do enjoy it, because it adds to that entertainment.
Yeah, I guess we live in that internet age, don't we, where we just have unprecedented access to everyone. You could literally tweet the president of the United States of America and tell him what you think. You know what I mean? Like, it's incredible. You can access anybody in the world, you know. And I think with combat sports, like, anyone can throw a punch, right? Not particularly well, but people feel like that they could do it. They sit there and they drink their beers at the pub and watch the fights on a Sunday and think, well, you know, I could do that. If I really put my mind to it, if I was really angry enough or whatever, I could do it. And I think that's why people just are so happy to sort of criticize people like Lockjaw and you know, fighters, because they just feel like there is a parallel world in which they could be a fighter as well, whereas really people like Lockjaw are the 1% of the 1%.
Yeah, maybe in some other parallel world of the multiverse, but in reality, where most of us do live, it just boggles my mind. And another thing about it is that, especially with this sport, people get so tribal so quickly, right? And you see this. It's like, we can be best mates as long as your friend's not fighting my friend, right? As soon as you say something bad about my friend, well, you're no longer my friend. And that's why I say, when people say, well, MMA, it's just a sport, it is to a certain extent, to the point where it's professional, but at the end of the day, it is a fight. And, you know, if tomorrow comes and Justin's fighting my brother, or he's fighting one of my best friends, well, we have to draw a line in the sand. Unfortunately, that line in the sand is drawn online. Right? And at the end of the day, it's never going to be crossed by people who don't know how to fight. So I used to read into it a lot, because when I first started, and when Eternal started to go on Fight Pass, it was almost once a week. You suck. You're trying to be Joe Rogan. You're not as good as John Anik. Bring back Daniel Maudsley, which is, in my opinion, bring back Daniel Maudsley. But but the reality is like, thank you for your feedback, fuck you, and have a nice day. It's just the world we live in. And there's nothing we can do about it. So you can use it as fuel, or you can use it to bring you down. But I like what Justin said. It's done by guys who really don't have skin in the game, and who are never really going to face those consequences, because they don't have the balls.
Yeah, 100%. Now, have you had any sort of funny or sort of cringe moments in the commentary booth that you kind of just look back and you're just like, oh, you know, it makes you just kind of sends a chill down your spine?
There has probably been several, Dan, some of which I have probably forgotten by choice. I mean, we have so much fun. I mean, with Kyle, we're always laughing and joking when the cameras aren't on us. But when that bell goes, it's business time. I wouldn't say cringe or funny moments, but there's been one time where I think Cam had to tell me, hey, listen, sit down and know your role. And what was happening, it was one of my mates was fighting. His name was Mikey Dunlop, and he was fighting a guy called Cathal Wellen, and I can't remember at what card it was, but But that's one of the hardest things about this job, is when you commentate your mates, you do have that invested emotion. And what happened was he came out in the first round and he got dropped. He got dropped straight away, and I thought he got finished. But the ref, he actually stopped the fight and called time because there were a few shots to the back of the head. So I took the headphones off and I started coaching him. One, I'm not a coach. I don't know much about MMA. I'm learning, but I'm not a coach. Two, I'm not in the corner. And three, I'm commentating the fight. So that's probably the only cringe moment where I go back and go, that's one thing I will never do again. And what I learned from that was when I was commentating Sam, when he fought Nick Kepu at Eternal 57, I made sure that, as hard as it was, to leave the emotions at the door and just call the fight as you see it. And it's funny you mentioned that, because people actually messaged me and said, hey, good job calling Sam's fight. I know there might have been a bit of bias there for you, but going back to it, we couldn't really tell which way you were leaning, because, I mean, I'm sure I was leaning towards Sam. But for the most part, the commentary, I tried my best to be down the middle. And as it turns out, Nick ended up winning that fight anyway, so it was a good result for him. But I think that's probably one of the ones that I can remember, is standing up and coaching my mate mid-fight and completely forgetting about commentary. And what's worse, these mics were on, so you could hear everything. And I went back and listened to it, and I said, can we like delete this off YouTube? And they're like, no, we're keeping it sucked in. So that's one of the moments that I've certainly learned from, and hopefully I don't cringe over that again.
Have you got a favourite memory? Is there something that stands out? It could be like an incredible moment in the cage, or you know, just a good day in the commentary booth. What's your favourite memory of being a commentator?
Josh Kuhn, Dim Skillies, by far. Josh Kuhn, Dim Skillies, and I think, you know, I go back to that fight and I'll watch it probably at least once every 2 months just to get a bit of a kick, because to me that fight, when you look at what was at stake, you know, Josh was undefeated right up until he met Dimps, and I said this beforehand, Dimps has a habit of ending people's undefeated records. Not to mention Blake Donnelly, but Blake Donnelly's only loss is to Dim Skillies by knockout in round 1 back at Eternal 52, I think it was. But that fight there, to me, was almost to me like the Forrest Griffin Stephan Bonner fight. It was the fight that put us on the map, because the amount of traffic that fight gained on social media, and I don't know how many people were watching that fight live, but you go back and watch that fight, and I think, to me, when I go back and watch that fight, I still get goosebumps to think that I was their cage side. So if I'm being honest, those two guys, for what they did for Australian MMA, I mean, we still talk about that fight to today, and to be their cage side for that one was incredible. So that's definitely number one so far in my career, cage side.
Yeah, it's a good choice, and obviously the best is yet to come, right? Isn't it? So,
I hope so.
But obviously, you know, you've got your own podcast on the side as well, the Tea Time Show. Can you tell us a little bit? Obviously, you've had this knucklehead on this side here on before. So, can you tell us a little bit about the podcast and your decision to get into that?
Yep. So it was, I think it was 2021. My good friend Ross, who's actually with me now, he owns his own financial advisory company, and we've been good mates since high school. We played rugby together, schoolboy footy, state footy, club rugby. We've been mates for almost, how long have we been mates for, Roscoe? 20 years? 20 years, too long for you, eh? And we were just out having a few drinks, and it was actually his suggestion. He just said, hey, mate, listen, what are you doing other than commentary? I was like, nothing. And he goes, have you ever thought about, you know, giving your own perspective on MMA by way of a podcast? And before then, I'd never even thought of it, you know, because I didn't want to go down that road of, you know, Tanera the commentator or MCT the podcast. I just want to be me. But I think the reason behind starting the podcast was to, and I'm sure you can attest to this, Dan and Justin as well, giving these guys a platform. And you know, I leave all the big names, the UFC guys, the Bellator, the One Championship guys, leave that to Joe and the rest of them. But for me, the reason I started the podcast was to not just use my profile as MCT for Eternal, but to give these guys a platform just to come on and talk and express themselves. So I did the first episode, I think it was mid-2022. Today we've just had a scheduled meeting to see how we can improve it, and hopefully get to about, say, 30 to 40 episodes by the end of the year. And it won't just be MMA based, but it will be. I'll have different guests on. I'll do pieces myself on topics in MMA, in sports, men's mental health. I've got a lot of friends who have experiences that they can share. But the main reason behind it was just to have a platform for us, mainly men, not to be sexist, but mainly men, to have a chat, come together, and express ourselves. Because I think that the more we talk, whether it's about MMA or just life in general, the more we can learn from each other, the more positivity we can spread. So I thought it was a great idea given to me by Ross, and we're trying to get off the ground, but we'll be flying high like a Fight Talk Down Under, hopefully very soon.
Lofty goals there, obviously, but no, it's a long walk, like this podcast thing. Like we're 38 episodes in now. This is episode 38, and it's a lot of work to sort of kick it off, and it's a crowded space. Every man and his dog's got has a podcast these days, so it takes a long time. You just got to be patient and consistent, I think, is the key, and that's something that Lockjaw and I have failed miserably at so far in 2023 is consistency. Mm-hmm. But that is an important element, and just putting yourself out there, and kind of like commentary, like and anything else, it's just a muscle that you learn to work, right? Isn't it? You just kind of practice over time, and you get better at it as you go along.
I think so, and I think it was amazing to me doing these episodes how nervous I actually was. I was like, no, I've been on the mic for several years now, but when it's a different environment, when you're cage side and there's cameras, there's lights and everything, I found that quite easy. Whereas if you're one-on-one with Justin or Diego or Jared or whoever's been on the show, you can find yourself slurring your words or getting tired or losing track. It was amazing. So I like what you said. Yeah, the more you do it, I mean, it's like anything. The more you do it, the better you get. So, hopefully, and even today, that's why I'm grateful for coming on here, because it's an opportunity for me to practice and express. And that's probably another reason why I started the podcast, was so when I do get in the booth, I'm not coming in there cold, because Eternal has shows, once a month. And if I'm not commentating anything else, I don't get much experience on this microphone. But if I can do this weekly for my own show or for you guys or with others, then at least that's going to help when I am cage side, when I do commentate poker or other things. So, yeah, no, it's definitely a journey. It's definitely a journey, a long one, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. And there's a vulnerability, I guess, to being on a podcast. Like, people say to me all the time, you should talk about yourself more and sort of open up and those sorts of things. But I don't know if that's really something that the fans really want. But it is different to just doing interviews. Like on, yeah, there you go. But yeah, I never do like
hear everything.
There you go. Maybe we'll roll out. Maybe if we get a quieter week, we'll talk about ourselves a little bit and our lives, because that is something that has actually come up quite a few times. Is that people want to be able to kind of relate to who they're listening to on the mic. So that'd be a whole nother thing. I'd probably be a little bit nervous about that, because I'm used to just doing interviews with fighters, right? I'm just the guy who asks the questions. It's pretty straightforward. I have a sheet that I work off and kind of just riff back and forth. But when you actually have to give your perspectives and opinions and stuff like that, it's a whole nother level of vulnerability.
You sometimes find that you think about what people subconsciously, you sometimes think, what will people think if I say this, or what will others think if I say that? Do you sometimes have those thoughts?
100%, yeah. I always think that. I always think like, have I gone too far into this? Have I said too much? Have I framed that in the wrong way? Because like obviously I'm a journalist on the side as well. Obviously work for One Championship as well, so I've got to be a little bit sort of selective at times. Obviously have to you have to be careful not to put my foot in it or sort of talk about things that I'm not allowed to talk about. So yeah, I've always have that in the back of my mind, and it's a hindrance, really. Like sometimes you can just overthink things, and it can sort of affect the final product. So sometimes you just got to give yourself a bit of freedom, but it's hard. I'm a neurotic sort of character, so yeah, I do overthink things a little bit.
No, that's fine. Any problems you get, just refer them to HR, aka Justin Van Heerden, and I'm sure he'll take care of them. So
he's HR's analyst, social media specialist. Of course, he's a man of many roles.
In the scheme of things, I do the bare minimum when it comes to this. Dan guys the ship a fair bit. I just show up, talk a bunch of shit. Sometimes I throw a bunch of curveballs his way he's not ready for, and I'm always like, I think afterwards sometimes I'm like, man, should I have like eased into that a bit, or I don't know. But obviously, we all know I hate talking about myself, so it'll be a while before I open up on this podcast, I guess. And yeah, just keep it going.
Love it.
Look, the curveballs are what we, what we sort of have you here for, Lockjaw. Sometimes, and your, I guess, inability to ease into things as well, just to, just give people a spray just off the cuff, just in the middle of a discussion about a fight or something. I think that's what the people show up for. That's what the people want.
Yeah, I mean, I love that shit. I love just calling stuff as I see it, and like I've said numerous times. If, the benefit of this being like, about combat sports and stuff like that, and, if I do say something and someone's offended by it, or they get pretty cut about something, or they get critical about something, call Cam and Ben and sign a contract and we can sort it out.
I love it. No, I love you guys. I think what you're doing, and it's good, because my mindset was always, well, why would people just want another MMA podcast? That was always my mindset. And I was just like, well, just do it. If anyone can do it, then why not you? And it's still hard for me to kind of what is a more qualified opinion going to think of what I say? Who cares? Say it. Deal with the consequences. Next episode. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I think the same thing all the time, and yeah, like you say, the world doesn't need another MMA podcast, does it? But we kind of just do it because we love it. Like we're just
Absolutely.
kind of, we're just mates. We just talk about fights all the time anyway, so we may as well kind of record it and put it out there. Obviously, Lockjaw's got some sort of educated opinions and things like that. So and I guess there aren't that many podcasts about the local scene as well. We kind of have a bit of a focus on the local scene, which is something that we're obviously passionate about and something we enjoy sort of talking about and sort of playing a tiny little role in. So that's kind of part of it too.
Well, to be honest, I mean, you guys are really, Fight Talk Down Under, I don't really know any other podcasts or channels or shows that are consistently covering the local talent here in Australia. I know they're out there, but you guys are the only ones I listen to. So how's that for a plug, eh? Put that one on your package.
That one's gone on Instagram straight away.
Put that one up.
That's good. Now we do have to talk about the local scene. Actually, we've obviously got a huge event on this weekend, Eternal 74. A couple of title fights and at the top of the bill. So yeah, we might just sort of start on the main card. Obviously, we probably haven't got a huge amount of time to go too deep into it, but obviously Taser Malone and Tom Pratt are opening the main card there. So yeah, Lockjaw, what do you make of that one?
This would be a good fight. Obviously, Tanera can speak on this as well. Taser's built his whole sort of rise up through Eternal, mostly. Like his whole amateur career is pretty well taken place on Eternal, apart from like a couple fights on Proving Grounds, I guess. So he's a guy that's obviously probably one of the first people that's, been built up in that Eternal brand and is now making his pro debut on Eternal. So I'm excited to see it. He's a guy that always brings exciting sort of fights. He's entertaining. He's sort of one of a kind. He's violent. He looks for the finish. He's one of those sort of Justin Gaethje type fighters where he's throwing himself in the fire. He's looking to put you away, and he's more than willing to be put away in the pursuit of that, if that makes sense. And the matchup with Tom Pratt is an interesting one. I've gotten to spar Tom a few times when him and Donnelly have, and the boys have come down from Canberra, come to freestyle, and I've moved around with him a fair bit. So I'm interested to see how he can, utilize his length. He's very tall, he's very long. He's really good at using his length. Really works really well behind his jab. So it's going to be interesting to see how those dynamics play together, and then how he deals with the constant forward pressure, the constant, tools that are being thrown his way from Taser's point of view. So it's a good fight to open the main card. I'm excited for it. I think, looking at it, I think it's going to just come down to how the range is dictated in the fight. So I'm leaning towards Taser's ability to sort of manage that and deal with it a bit. But in saying that, I'm excited to see the matchup play out because it's very intriguing.
Yeah, definitely. We've got an interview with Taser as well on Fight News Australia. It's not me, so everyone's don't have to worry about that. But one of the other guys has interviewed Taser, so make sure you check that one out. Tanera, what do you make of the matchup?
I agree with everything that Justin said. I think with Taser, I've been cage side since day one for him. 2017, he made his debut as an amateur. I think he went on a 4-fight win streak. and then a bit of a skid, and he's at a total of 10 fights as an amateur. It's about time he turned pro. And I think I said that in the commentary booth last time. I said it's about time. I think him, and again, this is where we go into what will other people think. Don't care. I think him leaving Shindo and going to CMBT was probably the best thing for him. Kerry Dunn and the team at Shindo, fantastic team. They've been around a long time, but I think for Taser, he was a big fish in a small pond at Shindo. Going to CMBT, he's a small fish in the ocean. Right, you're training with guys like, obviously Kamikaze's there, Brenton Mumford looking at making a comeback, Chris Lapham, Reece Giles, Jesse Yada, and James Sargis, and all of the talent out at CMBT. Taser's gone to another level, and you saw that in his previous fights. I don't know too much about Tom Pratt. I've got a bit of homework to do there, but according to what you're saying, Justin, it should be a good matchup. I've never bet against Taser, and I don't think I will against this fight as well. He's one of my favourites solely because he's homegrown, born on the Gold Coast, raised on the Gold Coast, continues to fight on the Gold Coast. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Taser this weekend.
Yeah, there you go. And after that, we've got, I actually don't know these two, I don't think, Hawani Selwyn and Andrew Kerr. So, how do you feel about that one, Lockjaw?
Yeah, but another one. So Hawani's obviously had a few fights on Eternal. One of those guys that sort of built himself up on Eternal. He's had a number of fights on there. Fought some tough guys. He's beat some good guys as well. And, this matchup's another sort of tough matchup for him. Andrew's coming off a loss, so obviously he's gonna, a loss that's probably one that stung him a fair bit because he was fighting a guy who's actually, a very good grappler, very good wrestler, and he was able to, like early on in the fight, stuff the takedowns and sort of limit that, and was kind of just starting to have a bit of a field day in the striking, and then in the process of him stuffing a takedown, the guy that he was fighting dropped and caught him in a straight ankle lock, which is so hard to finish on people that have sort of even the slightest bit of experience and understanding. It's just a hard submission to finish. So to get caught with something like that, and to get caught with something like that in a fight where you're not in a jiu-jitsu comp, like you're in an MMA fight, you can punch him in the face while they're trying to drop down for a leg. I think that would have stung him a bit more. So I think he's going to come in a lot more motivated for this to sort of bounce back and get a W. But it's just, for me, the thing with Hawani is it's like, what version is showing up to fight? Because there's been nights where I kind of relate him a bit to Michael Johnson in the sense, like there's been times where he shows up and he just smokes really good guys. And then there's other times where you're looking at it on paper and you're breaking down a matchup and you go, he should be sweet here. And then it doesn't turn out his way. And you're like, is it just a mental thing? Were you just not on? Like, what is the thing that's stopping you from doing that? Because like I've said, I've watched a number of his fights on Eternal and I've seen him get out there and, put on some cracking fights. And then you look at some of these other fights and you're like, the same guy just didn't show up. So, it's an intriguing fight for me, but I've got to lean towards Hawani based on the experience and especially on fighting on Eternal. Like we said, it's a bit of a production. It's a bit of a different feel. And I feel like that carries over, especially when you haven't sort of experienced that too much. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I've got to lean towards Hawani. I think he might get it with a submission in the second round.
There you go. Tanera, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I have to agree. I don't know too much about Andrew, but just off Justin's analysis, I think if you look at Hawani in his last fight against Darcy Spowett back at Eternal 67, again, another guy who left his previous gym to go to CMBT, you did see pieces of progression for Hawani, both on the feet and in the grappling exchanges. It was a tough fight against Darcy Spowett. I mean, for Darcy in that fight, fighting under Ben Vickers out of Scrappy MMA, it was his pro debut. Both of them were on debut as well. The fight could have gone either way, but just based off what I've seen from Hawani recently and his progression, you have to lean towards him. I'll do a bit of research on Andrew. He's obviously no slouch. He's fought on Eternal before, but it was a long time ago, 5 years back at Eternal 30. So, if you look at a guy that's looking to make a statement, the best way to do it would be against a guy like Hawani Selwyn. But just off my knowledge, I don't think he can go past Hawani. I think he'll go 2-0 this weekend.
Yeah, there you go. And obviously before the main fights kick off, we've got I guess you could call it a genuine crossroads fight, right? We've got Tom Nolan versus Aiden Aguilera. Obviously Tom's, the rising star. He's undefeated. He's he's on a bit of a tear, and Aiden's the former champion. He's been on the scene for a long time. He's obviously coming off the loss to David Martinez, so he obviously needs a win to sort of propel himself back towards that title shot. So what do you make of Tom Nolan versus Aiden Aguilera, Lockjaw?
Well, if we're looking at it just based on the product that you have available from both guys and what they're able to do, it's going to be potentially fight of the night, man. Both guys obviously are violent. Both guys come out with the intent of putting people away. I think Aiden's got a varied range of finishes with submissions and knockouts and stuff like that. And obviously Tom Nolan's shown that he's like violence personified. He just comes out there to put people away. You look at that fight with Adam Cook. There was a few times where in the process of him doing that, he experienced some adversity. He took some big counter shots that Adam threw his way, was able to sort of stay on him in a sort of calculated way, and then eventually put him away. But he's just, and the same with with Neem when he fought him. It was just he's a big guy for the weight class. He was a big guy when he was fighting at featherweight, so I don't even understand how he ever fought at featherweight. But he's obviously gotten older. He's probably he's a kid back then when he was fighting at featherweight as an amateur. He's obviously matured now. He's sort of grown into his physique a bit, and you can just tell the skill has caught up and sort of mashed with what he has physically to offer now. So yeah, it's always cool to watch him fight. But Aiden's got the experience. Aiden's as you touched on, he's fought the who's who of Australian MMA. He's gotten in there and mixed it up with some of the best guys that we've seen across that division and over a number of years. But I do have to say for this fight, I think that with the momentum that Tom Nolan has, how he's looking fight to fight and the improvements that he's making, I've got to lean towards him. I think it's going to be a very, 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 very exciting fight. It's going to be violent, but ultimately I see Nolan getting a decision.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely. Yeah, Tanera, what do you reckon?
I am not going to make a prediction on this fight. I love both of these guys, but I will give you just a bit of background on Tom. I was cage side for Tom when he fought Mitch Bayless. He was only 17 years old. And you could see right from day one that he really did have all the tools, the skills, and more importantly, the attitude to not just get to where he is today, but I think I've labelled him as the next big thing in the lightweight division. And when you look at that division, other than your division, Justin, at featherweight, that lightweight division is the most heavily contested division across Australia and New Zealand. So I think that's a big claim to make on a guy like Tom Nolan. But I think it's a safe bet because if you look at his 4-fight win streak, specifically his fight against Adam Cook, I thought he was going to have problems with Adam Cook. And I can say it now. I was kind of leaning towards Adam just based off who Adam was training with at the time at City Kickboxing. If you look at guys that can mimic the physical attributes of Tom Nolan, he's in the room with Dan Hooker, Israel Adesanya, these big, tall, rangy guys. But at the end of the day, I don't really want to harp on Adam about too much, but it was just fatigue that beat Adam. I remember Eugene that came over to Adam, and the first thing he said to Adam was, "Are you all right?" He said, "I'm okay." He said, "Are you just tired?" And Adam goes, "Yeah, I'm just tired." But you got to give that credit to Tom because that was one of the most grueling fights I've ever seen. And I think what it came down to is who wanted it more. And I think it's going to come down to the same thing in this fight against Aiden. Aiden's got all the experience in the world, and the story there is experience versus youth. Aiden said it that he's 32 years old. He can't afford to waste any more time. The time is now for him. So, again, won't make a prediction, but I do like what Justin said. Tom's got a lot of momentum behind him. It's going to be hard to stop. But if you had to put it down to one guy who can stop it, and he's done it before, it's Aiden Aguilera. So, again, this to me is probably an unofficial number one contenders fight. I wouldn't be surprised if whoever wins this fight fights for the title.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, it's an exciting matchup, isn't it? Like both guys have got so much to fight for, and it's just a great combination. You know, it makes for a great contest. But obviously, the co-main event is the lightweight title that both of those men are chasing is on the line. It's David the Smiling Assassin Martinez versus Blake Donnelly. So obviously, Lockjaw, you've got some experience with both of these guys. So yeah, what do you make of the matchup?
Yeah, obviously I've shared the match with both of these guys. Obviously I'm friends with both of these guys. Obviously want to support both these guys and see them both, continue to keep the momentum and do well. But, that's what we spoke about before. Every now and then your friends are going to end up fighting each other in this sport, and you just got to put all that shit aside. So, looking at this fight, obviously they fought before, and, Blake in the first fight he did very well to sort of shut the wrestling down, and the level changes from Dave's sort of perspective, and obviously then pieced him up on the feet. The fight got stopped for a cut. There's a bit of controversy in the stoppage, obviously, at the time when that fight happened. But, since then, both guys have obviously, had a sort of different sort of path since that fight. Obviously, Dave's had to he went on a bit of a slump, had to pick himself up by his bootstraps and then, get himself back on track. Worked his way back, won the belt back, and has just had, that momentum sort of come back to, his way. And he's made improvements in his game, and it's obviously something that I got to see sort of firsthand when he was down at Freestyle the last few times. He's definitely improving in all areas, and he's made those improvements. And if you look at the fight with Aiden, a lot of what he did in that fight gave Aiden a lot to think about and sort of troubled him a fair bit. And even just the kicks that he was throwing up, just the naked kicks, with no intention of actually landing the kicks. Like he's just throwing them up as like a range control and just throwing them up to sort of jam Aiden up. You could see a few times Aiden would like stop after Dave threw one of these kicks up and would go, "What are you doing?" Like he's almost reacting like, "What are you doing?" They're not like, you're not even landing, like they're not, I'm not threatened by this, but you're pausing, you're stopping. And then eventually he stopped and froze like that. Dave got in on the hips, took him down, and we all know what happened. That's all she wrote. He got put away. But obviously, if we go off the improvements that both guys made, I know activity-wise, Blake hasn't had as many fights in between their first fight as what, Martinez has had. But if you look at that last fight and you look at the performance that Blake put on, and obviously I can speak on this now, knowing that he did it on the back of a horrible weight cut and, being in hospital, to then rock up and put someone like John Bruin away in the fashion that he did and absolutely dismantle him. If there's one thing, if it comes down to who, like we spoke about, who wants it more, I think Donnelly's got that extra bit of ticker. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out with the improvements that both guys have made. But I'm going to try and look at this without the fact that I know both these guys and I'm friends with both these guys. In the lead up to my last fight before I got injured, obviously I got to do a fair few rounds with Blake, and the way he was responding in there, and the way he was, using his range, using his boxing. His awareness of where his hips were when we were in those grappling exchanges and those wrestling exchanges on the wall. I think there were times that obviously he drew from that and went, okay, if I'm lazy here, or I lapse and I let my hips get controlled, or I let someone, get and settle. I fight a featherweight. If I can settle on you and get control on you, if Dave gets a hold of you, yeah, I'll be honest, you're fucked. He's very strong. He's very good at controlling positions. He's very good at improving position. It's a nightmare with that guy getting an established position on you. So, I think Blake's going to be wary of that. Obviously, Dave's going to have those new tools on the feet and the new understanding of things to throw in. But I got to lean towards Blake for this one. I think he's just going to be able to rely on what he did in the first fight, be able to rely on the improvements that he's made. And he seems like he's hit a whole new level of confidence too. So I'm leaning towards Blake. It's hard to pick fights like this because obviously, like we spoke about, I know both guys, I'm friends with both guys. I want to see both guys do well, but I've got to lean a bit towards Blake. I know Dave's going to be a bit cut by that, but I just got to look at it, independently with the information that's presented. And I've got to lean towards Blake. I think Blake's going to be able to control the fight, control the pace, control the distance, and ultimately, find the victory.
Yeah, it went down like a lead balloon last time you picked against Dave, so prepare yourselves for that. Yeah, Tanera, what do you think? Who's your pick?
I will again struggle to pick this one, only because, like Justin, I'm a big fan of both guys. But I do agree with the analysis. You know, they say the rematch is never the same. It's the outcome that's yet to be determined. With Dave, like Justin said, if he gets a hold of you, I don't know anyone who he's gotten a hold of. Maybe Dimps. I mean, Dimps is a bit of a unicorn when it comes to mixed martial arts, but I don't know anyone that he's actually gotten a hold of and managed to keep down that's had any success with Dave. And you know, you can attest that you've done rounds with both these guys. But going back to Blake, if Blake Donnelly shows up in the same shape that he did against John Bruin, that's a very hard man to stop. And going into that fight, knowing a fair bit about John Bruin, I was talking to Kyle because Kyle had done a few rounds with John in Thailand, and he said, "Oh no, John's definitely ready for this one." I don't necessarily know if he said don't pick against him, but he gave me the idea that, you know, John was ready to make a statement at Eternal. Blake just went out there and smashed him, and I was quite surprised during that fight. So again, I agree with Justin's analysis. Stylistically, it's a promoter's dream. It's almost like Van Heerden versus Alabi, the grappler versus the striker. But if Dave can't get Blake to the ground, it's going to be a long night for Dave. If Dave does get Blake to the ground, which, like you said, Justin, then he's in a bit of trouble. So I think that's the anticipation that we're all waiting for. And again, won't make a prediction, but very excited to see it. And there's a bit of history between these two guys. Fortunately for Dave, he wants to get that rematch with Blake Donnelly and get that win back. Fortunately for Dave, he's got the title, which is what Blake wants. So I'd be hard pressed to see this match happening if David didn't have that Eternal lightweight belt. But as it stands, we're going to get to see the fight, and I think it's a treat for all of us at home.
It sure is, and I just had to chuckle there while you were speaking. So pretty much the blood drain out of Lockjaw's face there as you referred to Alabi versus Van Heerden as striker versus grappler there. So you just see the energy just drain out of his body there. So
we got to make a T-shirt out of that one day. Striker versus grappler, Alabi versus Van Heerden.
Just fuck, man. That's honestly. That every time I fucking think about that, it just stings me.
We won't let you forget it, mate.
But it made it sweeter that afterwards, my quote leading up to the fight that everyone got salty about, obviously his supporters, himself, everyone got salty with. When I did say that I'm levels above this guy and I'm going to show that.
Yeah.
Well, we did that. So sometimes it's kind of good when people make these error sort of filled assessments.
Can't argue with that one. Lockjaw has spoken.
Yeah, he has. And of course, we've got a main event to speak about, the Eternal Welterweight Championship. Of course, the champion, Caleb Crazy Horse Rideout, taking on Joey Luciano. So again, it's another fascinating, could we say it's striker versus grappler? I don't know. No, sorry, we don't say those things around here, do we? There's no such thing. No MMA fighter believes that they're a striker or a grappler. No one likes to be pigeonholed, do they? But yeah, it is an interesting stylistic matchup, right? What do you reckon, Lockjaw?
We shouldn't say this, but it 100% is a striker versus grappler. It is. Obviously, I'm pretty sure Luciano understands that his grappling and everything. He's got a very technical grappling sort of style. We've seen his varied range of takedowns. We've seen what he's able to do. His submission on Blake Shepherd, or on the Eternal card in Melbourne, might have been 59, maybe. I don't know. When I fought Michael Barber, obviously he finished with the rear naked choke in a very, very, very weird sort of position where obviously Blake was kind of folded down and he was just sliding back, no hooks in, and was able to put him away. So it was, he's obviously got a very dangerous grappling game, very technical, very sort of, very, very, very weird to sort of deal with because he's giving you so many sort of different threats. You know, whether he's in a body lock position, he's showing those foot trips, he's pulling at your wrist, he's climbing when he's already pulling you down. Like he's mixing things up and he's attacking your upper body with his upper body. He's attacking your lower body with his lower body. He's not just trying to focus on one point or one area when he is sort of in those exchanges. So yeah, and obviously we know Caleb is just wild and crazy, and his striking is obviously ridiculous and unorthodox, and his, you know, but also the very technical, which I think we saw a bit of in the Giuseppe fight. There was a few times where we saw Caleb, just working behind his jab, just drawing Kevin in, jabbing his face off, and then working off angles and then sort of mixing it up. Obviously, we've seen him against sort of like Ben Johnson spin to win and put him away with a spinning elbow, and he's done stuff like that a few times. So, yeah, I think this is a very interesting matchup. Caleb, I don't think cuts a lot of weight to fight at welterweight, whereas Luciano clearly does. He's a big fucking guy. So, it's going to be interesting to see how that does factor in. Obviously, in the fight with Kevin, Caleb was able to deal with that and was able to sort of get back to his feet when he was in those grappling exchanges. But I think this is a whole nother level with someone like Luciano. Obviously, when you saw that in the Tristan Murphy fight, Tristan's no slouch in the grappling. He's a big guy himself, cuts a lot of weight. But once Luciano got a hold of him, he just melted him and just was able to sort of shut him down. But I think the big thing here is, in my opinion, Caleb trains with the consensus most dangerous welterweight that's coming up in the country in Lachlan Stitt. And I feel like the work that he's doing with that guy on the daily and the rounds that those guys must get and the threats that he must get presented to him by someone like Lachlan, I think he's going to be, more than ready to deal with the stuff that Luciano is going to present to him. So this fight for me is a hard one to sort of. It's a hard one for me to sort of look at what both guys are presenting and then, sort of sit there and go, oh, well, these are the threats that Luciano has. These are the threats that Caleb has. I just got to lean with Caleb on this one, man. Like, I just think he's so unorthodox, so different, so wild and crazy that at any moment he can shut your lights out. Whereas Luciano's path to victory in this fight is through his grappling. It's one-dimensional and it's through the grappling. Like, I don't see him standing on the feet with Caleb and exchanging punches and kicks and elbows and knees and being able to put him away like that. I just don't see it. So I got to lean with Caleb in this one. I feel like he's gonna go out there, get the job done. It's gonna be wild. It's gonna be exciting. And like he said himself in an interview I just saw the other day, he's coming in there to put him to sleep. And I feel like that's what we're gonna see.
Wouldn't you just love to be a fly on the wall for the sparring rounds between Caleb Rideout and Lachlan Stitt? That would be that'd be a good watch for sure. But I don't know how Joey's going to feel about you sort of referring to him as a grappler as well. I think he does have experience in Muay Thai as well. So when guys like that, they typically feel like they've got a bit of everything. So he might be comfortable enough to sort of to try and stand with Caleb. You never know, but obviously Caleb's like you say, an unorthodox striker, and he's a difficult puzzle to figure out on the feet. We did have Joel from Fight News Australia head out to Absolute MMA in Collingwood to interview Joey Luciano. So that's on our Fight News Australia's channels as well. Just thought I'd slip that in there in case you want to get some more insight into Joey Luciano. It was a pretty good interview there. But Tanera, what do you make of the main event?
Yeah, this main event is going to attract a lot of eyes. I think that this is probably one of the most popular main events you'll see throughout the year, and that's a big call. But there's history between these two. Caleb Rideout has been calling out Joey Luciano for a period of, I want to say 12 to 18 months now, and finally it's happening. Not only is it happening, it's happening on the biggest stage of all for the most prestigious belt in the country. What I've noticed is that anyone who gets a hold of Eternal Championship belt, one of three things happen. One, they lose it. Two, they defend it. Or three, they get signed to the UFC. All right? It's pretty simple, okay? I can't see at this stage in his career, I can only see two of those things happening for Caleb Rideout, either defending it or getting signed to the UFC. And that's not to discredit Joey Luciano, again, in my unqualified opinion. However, to agree with Justin's in-depth analysis of this main event. When Caleb Rideout fought Ben Johnston, I don't think there may have been two people in the building that were cheering for Caleb, let alone expecting him to win. The whole stadium at the Gold Coast Sports Stadium in Carrara was there to see Ben Johnston come across from the world of Muay Thai as a WBC champ and make a statement in MMA. Now, we all know how good Ben Johnston is. Within about 2 minutes, Caleb Rideout shut that crowd down, got up on the cage and said, say something now. I don't think maybe Josh Kuhn, maybe Kamikaze is the only one that comes to mind, but I don't think I've ever been introduced to someone in that fashion cage side like I have with Caleb Rideout. So I am riding high on the crazy horse. I can't withhold that information. I've been a fan since he fought Ben Johnston. And again, to your point, Justin, he dealt with the grappling very well against Kevin Jousset. Kevin, again, another product of City Kickboxing. However, a lot of people say that rounds 3, 4, and 5, Kevin won. I think that you could argue that. But at the end of the day, let's face it, Caleb won the fight. And on that night, walked away with that Eternal welterweight strap. You mentioned Lachlan Stitt, pound for pound, dead shot head, as I've relabeled that saying. No one wants to fight him, so if you're sparring him on a daily basis, I can't imagine you'd be too comfortable in the training room, but come fight night, there wouldn't have been many things that you haven't seen. So, again, I'm riding high on the crazy horse. Won't make a prediction, but if you look at on the other side of the coin, Joey Luciano finished Blake Shepherd in spectacular fashion, came out against the big, strong Tristan Murphy, beat him within 2 rounds, again by submission. A guy who fought at middleweight in his last fight. The size will play a factor. But again, as the rounds progress, how well can Joey keep up with Caleb? Because Caleb doesn't slow down. And that's what we saw in the Jousset fight. Even though Jousset was able to get a hold of him, Caleb was still active. I think he threw a jab at the knee at one point, a hammer fist to the face. He's just got all the tools in the shed to strike from anywhere. So I think you know who I'm obviously picking, although I won't say it. But for all fight fans out there, if you're going to tune into to one fight this year, this would be the one, because you've got a guy who is incredibly entertaining in the Crazy Horse, and I guess the villain from Absolute MMA, who I might add, who also is a striker / grappler, been doing the majority of his camp over in Thailand, along with the team at Absolute MMA in Collingwood. This is one to watch. So definitely tune in.
Does the winner of this fight punch their ticket?
Yeah.
Does the winner of this fight punch their ticket to UFC or Contender Series?
You go.
100%. I think so. I mean, especially for Caleb's sort of, being that he is the champion if he defends his belt, certainly puts him in a really good position. I think it sort of separates you. And I did see, some of them, a couple of articles from some major media platforms like MMA Junkies have been mentioned on those a couple of times. And so that's always good when that's happening. But for Luciano, same way. I think he's on a 6-fight win streak. So you go out there, beat the champ, win the Eternal title, your 7-fight win streak. Then, as we know, the welterweight division isn't as stacked as, like maybe the lightweight and featherweight divisions and stuff like that. So, it's a lot easier to separate yourself from the pack and kind of make yourself the person that deserves a call up or is the person being identified in that division. Much the same as what we saw with someone like Stephen Erceg. The talent pool isn't too deep at flyweight, so you go out there and consistently put people away and put on these exciting fights. You're gonna have more of a chance to separate yourself from people. So I certainly think this is a big fight for both guys to be able to do that, to take that next step.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what Justin said, where they are in their careers, I mean, not just referring to the record, I think they've both had a total of roughly around 8 to 9 professional fights. It was around the same time Jack Della got promoted to the Dana White Contender Series, and he had the belt. So if you look at the history of that Eternal Welterweight Championship, I know it's not necessarily a long history, but it is a good history and a very credible history of Jack Della wins the belt, gets out to, I think it was 7-2 before he got 7-2, maybe 8-2 before he got signed to the Dana White Contender Series. You're looking at the same thing with Caleb and Joey as well, where they're at that point in their careers where they've got enough youth and enough experience to take that next step. And not only along with that, you've got that Eternal belt. That's prestige in itself. Who else are you going to fight? I mean, I'm sure they could probably find other fights within the welterweight division for whoever wins this main event on the weekend. But at this stage, they've both got the skills, they've got the technique, they've got the experience to go to the next step. I mean, why not take it?
Absolutely. And why not tune into episode 39 of Fight Talk Down Under next week? Of course, we'll be recapping Eternal 74. We've got a few locals in action abroad as well, so we'll be going deep on that. Until then, let us know if you have a question at Fight Talk Down Under on Instagram. Give us a follow, all that sort of stuff. Or you can hit me on Twitter at Meehan MMA or at Lockjaw MMA on Instagram. Remember to like and subscribe YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Fight News Australia and iHeartRadio. Also, stay tuned to Fight News Australia. I'm catching up with Damien Brown tomorrow to talk all things beatdown promotions. So that should be a good chat. It'll be I've plenty of insight into what his life's been like as a promoter so far. Tanera, thank you so much for coming on. Apologies, we've gone a bit over time, but it's been good to sort of spend the extra time listening to your soothing voice. It's been brilliant so far. But have you got anything that you want to promote? Anything you want to say to the fans? The floor is yours.
No, nothing that I want to promote. The only thing I want to say is thank you very much for having me on the show. I think what you guys are doing is great. And, we mentioned this earlier in the show. Just what the world needs, another MMA podcast, as long as the only podcast that you're listening to is Fight News Down Under, hosted by Dan Meehan and the champ, Justin Lockjaw Van Heerden. Make sure you like, subscribe, tune in to Fight News Down Under and the Tea Time Show if you've got time. But thank you very much for having me on the show. I loved every minute. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. We'll have to clip that and stick that on Instagram as well. But Lockjaw, what do you want to take us off with?
Yeah, well, usually, I like to cap these off and just spray someone and go hard in the paint, but this week's a bit different. I guess what I will leave off with is stay tuned, because there's a big year ahead in Aussie MMA. It's shaping up to be probably the biggest year across the board, from regional promotions all the way to the big dance with the UFC. So yeah, just keep supporting the fighters, keep supporting, the shows, and especially locally. I mean, like we said this before, don't miss out on going to a show and seeing some of this top talent fight now. We can see it live and in person in front of your face for $50, $60. And then, don't wait till they're in the big dance. And then, you're sitting there going, oh, the UFC comes to Melbourne or Brisbane or Sydney or Perth or wherever. And you're like, oh, I want to go watch, so-and-so fight. And it's $600, $700, $800 a ticket, or, whatever the case may be. Don't wait. You got a chance right now. Remember, all these people that we're watching in the UFC that you look up to and that you love fight, there was a time way back then where you could have gone to your local pub and seen them fight. And you probably missed out on the opportunity, but, now's the time. So if there's someone that you like watching or that you follow or that you, appreciate as an athlete or as a fighter, go there, support them, get involved, because when they're in the big dance and it's going to be way more expensive to go in there and do that.
I gotta watch it. You never know what might stop you. Here I am.